Speed ramping is a technique commonly used in videos to make footage gradually change speed. For example, that's how I was able to use this clip and turn it into this final sequence. And the kicker is that not only did I do this in less than 5 minutes, but I also did it with a very budget-friendly editing platform, extremely easy to use, even as a complete beginner. Hey guys, my name is E. I'm a professional sports videographer, and the purpose of my YouTube channel is to give you the tools and knowledge that you need to start your own sports videography career. And today I want to achieve that by teaching you how to produce a perfectly smooth and highly dynamic speed ramping sequence. As you know, speed ramping and sports videos go together like cookies and milk. So as a sports videographer, you need to know how to do it the right way. Especially that there are a few common mistakes that I see inexperienced sports videographers make all the time. For example, most videographers know that they need to film at a high frame rate, like 60 frames per second, to be able to speed ramp in post. But so often I see 60 frames per second footage edited in a 60 frames per second sequence. Meanwhile, the videographer has no idea why his footage loses quality every time he slows it down. So in this video, I'm going to break down all the mistakes that you need to avoid at all costs, and I'm going to show you exactly how to produce a perfect speed ramping sequence using one of, if not the most user-friendly editing platform on the market. We're going to work with Filmora 13 today because it is a very popular platform with my audience, mainly because of its price, its ease of use, and the level of quality that it can produce. But full disclosure, Wonderchef Filmora also happens to be the sponsor for this video. Filmora 13 is more user-friendly than ever, with great features like optimized video templates, AI smart cutout, and AI text-based editing. I won't get into those today, but later on in the video, I will use some of Filmora 13's visual effects to spice up our sequence. But for now, let's get into the most common mistakes that I see inexperienced sports videographers make when editing a speed ramping sequence. The first common mistake, like I mentioned earlier, is to use the wrong frame rate for your sequence. If you want to be able to slow down your footage in post-production, you need the frame rate of your sequence or your project to be lower than the frame rate of your original clips. So if you shot at 60 frames per second, for example, you need to edit your footage in a 24 or 30 frames per second sequence to be able to play your footage at full quality at 40% speed or at 50% speed. The second common mistake usually happens next. People tend to slow down their footage way too much. Again, if we take the example of 60 frames per second footage in a 30 frames per second sequence to keep it simple, the reason we can't go slower than 50% speed is because at 50% speed, our 60 frames per second becomes 30 frames per second and are therefore played at full quality. If we go slower than that, we are now showing less than 30 frames per second, and that will not look good at all. So if you want to go slower than 50% speed, either edit in a 24 frames per second sequence so that you can go down to 40%, or film in 120 frames per second, and you'll be able to go as slow as 25% speed in a 30 frames per second sequence, and as 20% speed in a 24 frames per second sequence. And the last common mistake I want to talk to you guys about, well, I'm actually going to wait and explain it and show it while we're editing the speed ramping sequence in Filmora, because it's just going to be easier to do it that way. So let's get into it now. Here's a clip that I want to use for this speed ramping tutorial. It's a beautiful goal by Montreal against Boston in the PWHL. The clip was recorded in 120 frames per second. So when I put it down in my timeline, the first thing that happens when you put a clip in Filmora is that it asks you if you want to convert your project to the settings of your clip. In my case, I already have my settings down because obviously you don't want to keep the same settings exactly as your clip because you want to make sure that the frame rate is lower, as we discussed earlier. So you can say yes to make sure that it's the same size and everything, but then you need to go in the project settings and change the frame rate back to 24 or 30 frames per second. And then you can either set it as default if you want to or not. It's up to you, but I always edit in 24, so might as well save it as default in my case, which I had already done. So now the next step is to basically find the endpoint where I'll start my speed ramping. Well, I'll first slow down my footage because I think I'm going to start at full speed, and I'm going to slow it down basically right here where the pass starts. So now I'm going to go to the speed tab, then select speed ramping, and then customize. There are already keyframes there that we can move if we want to, or we can add new ones with the plus sign. We'll probably do a bit of both. So with my first keyframe, I'm going to stay at 100% speed. And then the second one, I'm going to go down to 20%. But as you can see in Filmora, it's not in percentages. It's like basically 1 is full speed. So, 0.2 is the equivalent of 20%. So that's where I'm going. And I'm going to go, I'm going to stay at 20% right until she basically puts her arms up after scoring. And then at that point, I'm going to ramp it back up because the ref gets in my way, as they always do. So I'm going to speed up the part where she sort of, the player sort of skates away from the goal and the ref gets in my shot. I'm just going to speed through that, actually going at double the speed for that part because we almost don't want to be able to see that the ref was in my way. So I think double the speed, basically 200% or 2x in the case of Filmora, should do the trick. Actually, I think what I'll do, because that's it. She points at obviously at the other player who passed her the puck. So the moment where she does the pointing is where I'll basically, this is where we'll hit that 20% speed again. All right, so let's see how it looks so far. That's good. That's perfect. All right, so from there, I think we'll speed it back up again because otherwise it's going to be a very slow celebration. We're going to keep it slow for a little bit, but then speed it up to basically have all the other players join her in the celebration at probably at full speed, I'd say. Actually, you know what? I thought I was going to go full speed here. I think I'm going to go again a little bit faster. Maybe not 200% like last time, but maybe like 1.6. So 160% speed, something like that. I think that's going to look better. And then again, go back to 20% for the actual sort of group celebration. And it's important to notice that, especially in that last transition from fast to slow, I definitely went a little bit longer for the transition because that's the third common mistake. I think a lot of people make their transitions in speed ramping way too harsh. I think there's a time and place for that, obviously. Sometimes even one frame is enough. But especially if you're coming from like 200 or 300% speed to 20% speed, it's always good to make your transition a little bit longer, give it time, maybe even play with keyframe interpolation if need be. In this case, I don't think it's necessary. But yeah, as I said, the third most common mistake in speed ramping is transitions that are way too harsh. And then the last thing I'm going to do speed ramping wise is just go back to full speed so that in a normal edit, the play after that one would be at full speed. So it's just finish up at full speed, start the next one at full speed, and it's just sort of seamless from one clip to the next. But we're not going to stop here because, as I said earlier, there's a few more things. There's tons more things you can do in Filmora to make this clip more professional. I'm just going to add a couple. First of all, I'm going to add a LUT because I know a lot of people, that's a question that I get a lot with my LUT pack that I sell on my website, the Ultimate Sports LUT pack. People always ask me if you can use it in Filmora. Yes, you can. You can import custom LUTs in Filmora, not just mine, but any LUTs. But in this case, we'll use one of mine, just a sneaky promo of my own content, but also just to show you how it's done. It's super easy. when you select your clip, you just go on the color tab, then next to LUT preset, you can press the add button and just go get the LUT wherever it is saved on your computer. And once you've done that once, that LUT will remain in Filmora. So if you look at the drop down menu of my copy of Filmora, you can see a bunch of my other LUTs available as well. But anyway, for this, I chose to use the MVP LUT, which I think works really well, especially that because I'm filming behind the glass, the image is a little bit muddy. It loses a lot of contrast, a lot of sharpness, and the MVP LUT brings back a lot of it, as you can see, obviously. You can tell that the image was muddy to begin with, because usually I would never leave the strength of a LUT at 100%, but in this case, it actually works. So I'm gonna leave it that way. The only thing is that the ice looks very bright, so I'm gonna take the highlights down a fair bit actually. And what else could I do? I'm probably gonna play with the colors. It does look a little reddish to me. And I'm doing this just like, you know, I'm not taking this, it's not a color grading tutorial. So yeah, I'm just gonna play with saturation. I think, yeah, a bit of green, and even, I think I'm gonna go for like a greener sort of look. Yeah, I think that's fine. Like, there's always other things we could do, but I wanted to also show you guys all the visual effects that you can add. Filmora is full of them. They're pretty cool. This is actually way more convenient and easier, and there's a lot of quality stuff in there. It's way better than Premiere or Final Cut, because with Premiere, for example, which I use, like, none of this stuff would be included in the editing software. I would have to import it, find it somewhere online, either for free or buy them, all these assets, and then import them in all my projects. With Filmora, it's all there. There's overlays, there's visual effects, there's filters, there's so much stuff you can play with. But in our case, I'm looking for something that I want to use every time we speed up the footage, basically. And I think that the first effect that I played with, the large green flare, is actually the best fit, especially that it is green, and I gave my footage a green tint already. But I'm just gonna make this effect a touch shorter, because I don't want it to still be there when the footage slows down. As you can see, it's pretty easy to just adjust the length of an effect, or a clip for that matter. So yeah, I'm gonna add another one here because we speed up again. And again, I'm gonna make it way shorter. Let me know what you think. All right, so check out the link in the description if you're interested in getting your own copy of Filmora 13. Otherwise, I'm already moving on to editing my next YouTube video, so make sure you subscribe to my channel if you don't want to miss it.